The building had a memory longer than anyone working inside it. Dolores Vega had understood that since her third year, not her first. On her first day, she was 31 years old and pushing a mop cart through the basement corridors of Harmon General Hospital at 2 in the morning, learning the floor plan by feel, because the laminated map they gave her was wrong in 3 places. Understanding came gradually. The way you learn a language by living inside it, one corridor at a time, one locked door at a time, until the grammar of the place became something she carried without thinking. Harmon General had been built in 1938 as the Harmon County Tuberculosis Sanatorium. That was the first thing old Celestino had told her, and he had said it the way people say things they believe you need to know before anything else. Celestino Ruiz had been head of facilities maintenance for 22 years by then, a small, precise man in his late 60s who moved through the hospital sub-basements with the confidence of someone who had memorized every inch of ground he stood on. He had given Dolores her first assignment, her first key ring, and 3 weeks later, a cup of coffee in his office, and something she would not fully understand until years after he retired. This building was already something before it was this, he said. Hospitals forget that. The administrators forget. The doctors forget. The building doesn't. She had nodded politely. She was 31 and practical with 2 kids in elementary school and a mortgage on a row house 12 minutes away. She was not thinking about what buildings remembered, but Celestino had handed her a small green notebook before she left that office. He had a dozen of them on his shelf, all the same kind black and white marble covers, each one with year written on the spine in black marker. Write down what you notice, he said. Not what breaks, not what you fix, what you notice. She took the notebook. She told herself she would probably never use it. She filled it in 8 months. Celestino retired in 2001. He left her the notebooks, all 22 of them, a complete record of his time in the building, in a cardboard box with a sticky note. Asterisk, you're the one who looks. Keep looking, asterisk. She read every notebook twice. Celestino's records taught her things the official documentation never mentioned. The sub-basement be corridor that dead-ended 14 feet before the exterior wall, with no explanation in any building plan. The faint pressure differential near the end of that corridor, a slight resistance felt only when the HVAC system ran at full output. The smell he described on page 40 of the 1993 notebook. Asterisk antiseptic, but old, not current product. Something preserved. Asterisk. He had knocked on that wall himself. He'd written about it in 1993, and again in 1997. Asterisk, the corridor terminates incorrectly. There is space behind the wall that does not appear on the 1961 building plans. Could be a utility void. Could be something else. Have not been able to determine which without opening the wall, which I do not have authorization to do. Worth watching, asterisk. Dolores had read that entry her first year with the notebooks. She had gone down to sub-basement B that same evening and stood at the end of the corridor herself. She pressed her knuckles against the plaster wall. The sound that came back was hollow. Not the dense thud of concrete, but the brief resonance of empty space. She had knocked again, just to be sure. Then she had walked back to her office and written the date, the location, and asterisk, the wall is hollow. Celestino was right. Something is behind it. Asterisk, that was in 2001, 27 years ago. She had knocked on that wall approximately once a month for 27 years. The hospital had changed around the wall without ever changing the wall itself. New wings, new equipment, 3 renovation cycles that never reached sub-basement B because sub-basement B was where the old utility runs lived. The original steam pipes from 1938, mostly decommissioned, but still structurally integral enough that nobody wanted to disturb them. The building's bones were down there, and bones you left alone. Dolores was at a facilities maintenance now, had been for 11 years. She had a staff of 14, a digital work order system she distrusted and used anyway, and 17 notebooks with marble covers on a shelf in her office. The official facilities documentation for Harmon General ran to 11 binders, a network drive, and a set of architectural drawings last updated in 2004. Those drawings showed sub-basement B as a utility corridor terminating at a mechanical room near the east wall. They did not show a room at the end of the short stub corridor that branched off the main run, because no room had been shown there in 1961, or in any architectural update since. But the 1938 blueprint told a different story. Dolores had found it in her 8th year, rolled inside a tube she'd pulled from behind a decommissioned electrical panel during a rewiring project. The tube had been jammed in that space so long the paper had partially adhered to itself, and she spent 40 minutes at her desk unrolling it carefully, breathing slowly to avoid tearing the edges. It was the original construction drawing for Subbasement B, dated April 1937, stamped Harmon County Sanatorium, construction set, sublevel 2. The drawing showed the stub corridor clearly, and at its end, a room labeled in small type, Isolation 7, negative pressure, mechanical ventilation required. She had sat with that drawing for a long time. Then she had gone to Subbasement B and knocked on the wall again. This time the knock felt different, not because the wall had changed, but because she now knew what she was knocking on. She had written in her notebook, Asterisk found original 1937 drawing. Isolation 7 is real. It was built, then it was sealed. I do not know why. I do not know what is in it. Asterisk. Then, after a pause, she had added something that surprised her when she read it back. I am not sure I should open alone. She was not someone who frightened easily. She had been in every mechanical room, every utility shaft, every basement corner of this building at 2 a.m. But something about that room was different. Even through the wall, it felt different. She left it alone. For a while. The HVAC project was announced in February. It came from administration, a capital improvement initiative funded and approved after 3 years of planning. The hospital's aging air handling infrastructure needed replacement, and the project would begin in Subbasement B, where the main distribution manifold sat. New ductwork would run through the subbasement to serve a new oncology wing on the hospital's south side. The project was expected to take 14 months. Dolores read the project brief twice. Then she walked to Subbasement B. She stood at the entrance to the stub corridor. The corridor was 22 feet long. The wall at its end was plastered smooth, tight, professional, the kind of work that dated to the early 1960s. The HVAC ductwork diagram showed new runs through the main corridor and into mechanical rooms. The stub corridor wasn't on the diagrams at all. It had been omitted, an incomplete section of a rarely used subbasement, apparently not worth routing through. Dolores looked at the wall. Then she went back to her office and pulled out the 1937 blueprint and her notebook from 2001, the year she'd first written about the hollow sound. She read Celestino's 1993 entry. She read his 1997 entry. She read her own notes from 12 separate years of periodic knocking and observing and writing it down. Then she called Marcus Beecham, the project manager. Beecham was efficient and managing 6 projects across 3 states. He communicated in the shortest sentence that would complete a thought. Dolores told him about the stub corridor, the 1937 drawing, Isolation 7. She told him the wall was hollow, documented observation, 27 years, and that the room had been sealed during the 1961 conversion. She didn't know what it contained. She believed the project team should know about it before cutting into subbasement walls. Beecham listened. What's your concern specifically? I don't know what's in that room. I know what was built for negative pressure isolation, TB patients, 1938. Sealed in 1961. I don't know what was sealed with it. It's been sealed 60 years. 63. Has it caused problems? No, but your ductwork runs along the main corridor, which shares a wall with the stub. If there's a ventilation shaft inside that room, negative pressure rooms require dedicated shafts. I want to know where it terminates before your crew starts cutting. A pause. We have the 2004 architectural drawings. No shaft is shown. The 2004 drawings don't show the room either. Shorter pause. I'll flag it with our engineer. She thanked him. She went back to her notebook and wrote, Asterisk told Beecham. He listened. He will flag it. I do not think he understands what I am telling him. Asterisk. Then she wrote something she hadn't planned. Asterisk, I'm not entirely sure I understand myself. What if the room is just a room? What if I'm raising an alarm over 63 years of nothing? Asterisk. She looked at that sentence. She left it there. Uncertainty was worth writing down, too. The HVAC crew arrived in mid-March. Professional, careful, experienced with occupied hospitals. Dolores monitored for 2 days before allowing herself to relax slightly. The wall cutting started on the 3rd day. The crew was opening access points in the main corridor wall to route new ductwork connections. Dolores was watching from the corridor entrance when the foreman, Stroud, came to find her. "There's something you should see." He led her to the 3rd access cut in the east wall of the main corridor, the wall that on the other side formed the outer face of the stub corridor. The cut had gone through 4 inches of wall material and opened into a cavity. But instead of the back of the stub wall, they had found something else, a secondary wall running parallel, with a gap of 8 inches between the outer surface and an inner layer. And in that gap, running vertically, was a duct, not new ductwork, old ductwork, the original 1938 kind. Galvanized steel, riveted seams, painted so many times the original surface had disappeared. The duct rose from below the floor level and disappeared into the ceiling space above, sealed at both ends with sheet metal caps that had been bolted on, not welded. Someone had installed them, expecting that someday someone else might need to remove them. Dolores crouched at the access cut and looked at the duct. "Does that run anywhere on your diagram?" she asked Stroud. He had already checked. It did not. She did the geometry. The duct's position put its other end somewhere inside the stub corridor, possibly inside the wall that ended the stub, possibly inside whatever was behind it. She pulled out Celestino's 1993 notebook from her jacket pocket. She had been carrying it with her for 2 days, the way you carry something you feel you might need. She read the smell entry again. Asterisk antiseptic, but old, not current product. Something preserved, asterisk. Then she read the paragraph below it, which she had somehow absorbed without truly registering all these years. Asterisk mentioned the smell to Dr. Parrish in infection control. He said old negative pressure rooms sometimes retain chemical stabilizers from early TB treatment, formaldehyde compounds, mercury-based antiseptics. If a room was sealed with those materials inside, the off-gassing would be contained as long as the seal held. He said he wouldn't want to open such a room without knowing what was inside first. I asked how you find out. He said you'd call the state health department. I think I should do that. I'm going to think about it more first. Asterisk. There was no subsequent entry about Dr. Parrish. No mention of the state health department. Celestino had thought about it and decided not to act. Dolores stood up slowly. The duct was 8 inches from the contractor's saw. Beauchamp's team was scheduled to cut the next access point 6 feet east along the same wall tomorrow morning. She called Beecham from the corridor. "We found the shaft," she said. "It's in the wall cavity. It connects to the sealed room. Your crew's cut is 8 inches away from it." This time, Beecham did not tell her the stub corridor was outside his scope. Work in sub-basement be paused while the situation moved up the chain. Dolores filed a formal facilities concern with photograph of the access cut, the duct, the 1937 blueprint, and the relevant pages from Celestino's notebook. But the 2 days of waiting were the hardest part. Not because nothing was happening, because Dolores spent them with a thought she couldn't shake. She had been right about the duct. She had been right that the room was there. But what if she was wrong about the danger? She had spent 27 years in this building. She had knocked on that wall without ever getting sick. The staff who worked in sub-basement B, they were all fine. Nothing had ever come out of that room. What if all she had done was pause a $14 million project over a room full of nothing? She sat in her office at 11:30 at night and wrote in her notebook, asterisk, "I might be wrong about the danger. I am not wrong about the room. Those are 2 different things. I need to hold them separately. Asterisk." She looked at Celestino's stack of notebooks on her shelf. She had judged him, quietly and privately, for stopping at the edge, for noticing and writing, and not calling the state health department. She understood now what that felt like, to stand at the edge of something irreversible and ask whether your certainty was real or just the shape your fear was taking. She hadn't been certain. She had acted anyway. She called the State Department of Health the next morning. The state sent an environmental assessment team within 4 days. They arrived with air sampling equipment and an epidemiologist named Dr. Fran Adesanya, who had the brisk, unfrightened manner of someone who had opened difficult rooms before. Adesanya reviewed the 1937 drawing, the photographic record, and, at Dolores' insistence, the relevant pages from Celestino's notebooks. She read them carefully and set them down and said, "Your predecessor documented this in 1993 and chose not to escalate. Why do you think that was?" Dolores considered honestly. He wasn't sure enough to open something he couldn't close again. "And you?" "I wasn't sure either. But the wall got opened anyway." Different question now. The air sampling came first. A small bore hole at the base of the sealed wall, controlled, nothing that would disturb whatever had existed in there for 63 years. Results came back in 72 hours. Elevated formaldehyde, trace mercury compounds. Consistent with chemical stabilizers used in TB treatment and sanitation protocols in the 1930s. No active biological hazards. The tuberculosis organism was not viable at these concentrations after 6 decades of sealed containment. But the 1938 ventilation shaft connected the sealed room to a vertical chase running through 7 floors of the hospital's interior wall. If that shaft had been breached during the HVAC work, if a saw had cut to the wrong section of wall cavity, the sealed air would have entered the building's live circulation. The formaldehyde concentrations were significantly above safe exposure limits. The mercury compounds would have required full contamination, remediation across the affected floors. Adesanya explained this to Dolores, to Beecham, to the hospital administrator, and to a man from the county health office who took many notes. When she finished, the room was quiet. The administrator, Dr. Osei, said, "How do we know to stop before cutting that wall?" Beecham looked at Dolores. "Facilities maintenance flagged a concern," he said. "Before we started, the room was remediated over 6 weeks. Control ventilation, chemical neutralization, professional clearing of whatever remained inside Isolation 7 after 63 years. When Adesanya came to find Dolores in the corridor afterward, she said, "It was a patient room. Small, maybe 12 by 14. Original fixtures, still in place. A bed frame, a cabinet, a window that had been plastered over from the inside." Dolores thought about that. A window plastered from the inside. The HVAC project was completed, 8 weeks behind schedule, for $100,000 over budget, with the ductwork rerouted clear of the now decommissioned shaft. The architectural drawings for Harmon General were revised for the first time in 20 years. Isolation 7 appeared on them, labeled and documented, with a note referencing the 2024 environmental assessment and the 1937 original construction plans. The State Department of Health submitted a report noting that identification of the hazard had been made possible by maintenance records kept outside the hospital's formal documentation system, spanning 33 years across 2 facility managers. It recommended that hospitals with pre-1960 construction consider systematic review of informal maintenance documentation for undocumented building features. Dolores read that paragraph and thought of Celestino, a man who had smelled something old in 1993 and written it down and wondered whether to call someone and decided to think about it more first. He hadn't been wrong to hesitate. He had understood something she was only now understanding, that some doors once opened don't close again. He had chosen not to open it. She had opened it anyway. She wasn't sure yet whether that made her braver than him or simply differently afraid. The hospital held a small recognition event in the spring. Dolores had declined anything that looked like a ceremony. A meeting room, some colleagues, a framed letter. The letter said the standard things. It credited her experience and her diligence and her extensive knowledge of the building. It did not mention Celestino. After the meeting, Dolores went back to her office. She took his 1993 notebook from the shelf and opened it to the page with the smell entry and the paragraph about Dr. Parrish. She thought about what it cost a person to notice something and write it down and carry it quietly for years, not acting, not certain enough to act, but not forgetting either, keeping the record, passing the notebooks on, trusting that whoever came next would be standing in the right place at the right moment to do something with what had been noticed. She got out a fresh notebook, new marbled cover, the date on the spine in black marker, and wrote a note on the first page addressed to whoever would come after her. She described Sub-Basement B in the kind of detail that would take someone years to accumulate alone. She described the corridor, the stub, the now documented isolation 7, the decommissioned shaft, and then she described 3 other things she had noticed in the building over 33 years, anomalies she had never been able to explain, that had never caused a problem, that might someday matter. The smell on the 4th floor near the old physician's lounge, antiseptic, old, present only in July when the cooling system ran at maximum load. The door on Sub-Basement A that swung differently in winter than in summer, not humidity, she had checked, but a slight, consistent annual movement in the wall beside it. The mechanical room on the 6th floor that ran 4 degrees cooler than its corridor regardless of season or HVAC output. She had no explanation for any of these. She did not pretend to. She wrote them down the way Celestino had taught her, without knowing he was teaching her. The way you write something down when you believe that paying attention is its own form of faithfulness, and that whoever comes next deserves to know what the building has been trying to say. The hospital had a memory longer than anyone working inside it. And now, so did the record,